apologies for that interruption. My phone just completely and computer went dead because my apartment is actually extremely very hot. And it's just shut down automatically. My apologies. All right, so let me pick up. I was discussing on the demonization of Africa, particularly when it came to independence. And I'll wrap up soon so I can have time for discussion. So Africans were portrayed as not deserving of independence. So let's take one example. The New York Times sent a reporter named Homer Bigart, who was renowned in American journalism. He'd already won the Pulitzer Prize twice, and they sent him to cover decolonization, which was ongoing in Africa. So he gets to Ghana, and he writes to his editor here in New York. His foreign news editor, his name is Emmanuel Friedman, and he writes him a letter. This is a personal letter saying, quote, "I'm afraid I cannot work up any enthusiasm for the emerging republics. The politicians are either crooks or mystics. Dr. Nkrumah is a Henry Wallace in burnt cork. I vastly prefer the primitive bush people. After all, cannibalism may be the logical antidote to this population explosion everyone talks about." Now, so after I did some investigative research for this book, and these were letters that I discovered in the archives of the New York Times. Even though this was his personal letter to his editor, the articles that he subsequently published had a perfect correlation between what was purported to be a news article and these views that he expressed in his letter to his foreign news editor. He described Africans as savage, as bizarre, as macabre, and he even made up incidents, he or his editors, to fulfill that agenda of wanting this racist depiction of Africans. So, for example, he wrote another letter to Bigard when he was sent to Friedman, his editor, when he was sent to cover decolonization in what was then Belgian Congo. And in that letter, he complained that he could not find pygmies to interview them on the meaning of independence. But by the time his article was published in the New York Times, okay, now look, the history of the Belgian Congo, one of the most horrific histories of European colonialism in Africa, with an estimated 10 million Congolese exterminated. Many of them had their hands cut off, their feet cut off, because they did not produce enough rubber or enough ivory. So you would think perhaps a responsible publication, you would think perhaps the New York Times would say, let's interview some of these victims, elderly survivors who may still be alive, or let's interview their descendants about the meaning of independence, given this horrific history of Belgian colonialism and imperialism. But no, they're looking for pygmies to demonize. So by the time the article is published, even though he confessed that he could not find any pygmies, the New York Times article says, to pygmies, independence means now they can have more meat, now they can have more beer, now they can have more salt. And let me just give you an indication of the mindset of this foreign news editor. He wrote back at one point a letter to his reporter, so-called reporter in Africa. This is a letter from March 4, 1966. This is just a note to say hello and to tell you how much your peerless prose from the Badlands is continuing to give us and your public. By now, you must be American journalism's leading expert on sorcery, witchcraft, cannibalism, and all the other exotic phenomena indigenous to darkest Africa. All this and nationalism too. Where else but in the New York Times can you get all this for a nickel? So this is the impression that the New York Times is giving the world about the meaning of independence to Africa. And the New York Times went beyond call of duty in terms of their determined demonization. And what do I mean by this? In my investigation in their archives, I found a letter written by one of their reporters from Nigeria in the 1960s. The reporter's name was Lloyd Garrison. He's a descendant of the abolitionist, William Lloyd Garrison. And the letter was complaining that by the time he read his published article in the New York Times, there was a concoction inserted into the article by editors sitting here in New York, something he did not write. And what was that? It was a reference to Nigerians dressed in grass leaves skirts. He didn't see it, he didn't write it, but his editor sitting here in New York saying this article does not seem to us to be representative of Africa. So they made it up, completely fake news, and inserted it into that article. This was the extent and level of demonization. And this is what we still need to deconstruct and challenge, to open up the minds of our people, to liberate the minds of our people. So for example, in Uganda today, we have a secondary school named Sir Samuel Baker Secondary School. The same Samuel Baker who said Africans should not be compared to the noble character of the dog. That is still a colonized mind. And let's go even further. A few years ago, I read this remarkable article in a Ugandan paper called The Monitor. And the alumni from the school were raising money, not to give scholarships to young Ugandans to go to Sir Samuel Baker School or to go to another place to study, but to build a statue, a monument to Samuel Baker, a monument to the decolonizer, to the abuser. So sisters and brothers, this just gives you an indication of how much we still need to go before we can decolonize the African mind, to elevate self-worth of Africans on the continent and in diaspora. And this can come with the knowledge. In Burkina Faso, in 3 years alone, Thomas Sankara was able to accomplish so much in terms of decolonizing the mind of the Burkinabe. He started off by changing the name from Upper Volta to Burkina Faso, the land of the uprighteous people. And yet, we still have a Lake Victoria and a Lake Albert in Uganda that would not exist if we had a Sankara-type leadership in Uganda. So what are some of the solutions? We need to deconstruct the literature historically that demonized Africans. And I believe this is my own contribution, Manufacturing Hate, how Africa was demonized in Western media. I believe more of our writers need to engage in that type of deconstruction to educate our people. Collectively, all of us gathered in this great meeting, we have writing skills. I propose that before this year is over, we create a website. Many of us have our own news outlets. I have Black Star News, and I welcome articles elevating our people's consciousness. But at the same time, I think we can also create a new outlet that all of us engage in this meeting collectively own and collectively contribute to deconstructing the demonization of Africa, historically and contemporary. So for example, even in our contemporary era, when we see the Western papers writing about tribal wars in Congo. What tribal wars? These wars are financed by Western companies who go through comprador leaders, General Yoweri Museveni in Uganda, Paul Kagame in Rwanda, to invade Congo. Millions of Africans are dying. At the same time, these Western corporations are mining resources from the Congo. They just don't want to pay royalty and taxes. So what? What do they call it? Tribal wars. And then there's no discussion. Many of these companies are listed on the website of the United Nations. These are genocidal wars for profit. They're not tribal wars. And they go through reactionary rulers like General Museveni in Uganda. Many people don't know how reactionary this individual is. In an interview in the Atlantic Monthly magazine of September 1994, this is what he said: "I have never blamed the white man for taking slaves. If you're stupid, you must be taken as slave. I've never blamed the white man for colonizing Africa. It sounds so unbelievable that you're welcome to go and read it for yourself. Atlantic Monthly Magazine, September 1994. Yes, this is the type of individual that they promote and sustain and finance in Africa with financial and military assistance. The Patrice Lumumbas, they eliminate. The Sankaras, they eliminate. The Modibo Keitas, they remove. The Nkrumah, they remove from power. The Mobutus, they sustain. The Musevenis, they sustain. It is our task to help elevate more Thomas Sankaras and help our African youth remove misrulers like General Museveni. That's the other thing that we can do. So sisters and brothers, I want to bring my presentation to a conclusion, and I'll be more than happy to take some questions in the remaining time that we have. Thank you. All right, so I see some comments. Let me just see if I can respond to some of them. Each generation of elders has failed. Our children, our people and children have amnesia. It can be done. I'm very hopeful. Sankara accomplished so much just in 3 years in Burkina Faso. My students at John Jay, when I teach them, they come back to me and they tell me that when they get home, they sit down their parents and they share the same lessons with their parents. At one point during the pandemic, when we were teaching only via Zoom, I wasn't aware of this, but at the end of the semester, my students told me that their siblings and their parents actually sat in on the lessons as well. So the thirst and the hunger for the knowledge is out there. And I think collectively, we can really elevate the status and the minds of our people, because as I said, by the end of each semester, my students walk out completely different, and they come back to me even the following semester, and they tell me that they share this knowledge with other people that they interact with their other friends. So it can be done.